Tony Blair steps down and Gordon Brown takes over as British Prime Minister tonight.
North Korea to allow UN inspectors to visit its main nuclear plant tomorrow.
Donald Trump kicks off handover anniversary celebrations in Beijing. Good evening. It's the end of an era as Britain gets ready to welcome a new leader. Prime Minister Tony Blair is stepping down tonight and his deputy Gordon Brown will take over.
In a short while, Blair will leave number 10 Downing Street for Buckingham Palace to tender his resignation to the Queen. Earlier tonight, he left for Parliament for the last time as leader of Britain to the jeers of anti-war protesters gathered at one end of Downing Street. His replacement Chancellor of the Exchequer, Gordon Brown, will take the reins in just over 1 hour. Once hailed as Britain's brightest hope, Blair was forced to step down because of his support for the disastrous invasion of Iraq. ATV's Ben O'Rourke takes a look at 10 turbulent years of his leadership.
Tony Blair always wanted to be a rock star. It never happened, but one of the first things he did after coming into power was use it to hobnob with the likes of Oasis singer and songwriter Noel Gallagher, a signal there was a new kid on the block and British politics had changed forever. But by the end of the first term at number 10, it was clear the youthful visionary that won his Labour Party a big parliamentary majority had entered office unprepared. Many of Blair's domestic policies amounted to simply reversing those of the Conservatives he'd replaced. Things improved in his second term, although anything he did was overshadowed by the attacks on the US on the 11th of September 2001 and what came after.
I believe we have to go on fighting terrorism as long as it takes. Because what happened on the 11th of September was, of course, a brutal and horrific attack on America. But it was a demonstration of what these people are capable of in any part of the world.
When US President George Bush launched his so-called war on terror, Blair joined in with seemingly unflinching obedience, leading many to dub him Bush's poodle. After the invasion of Afghanistan, Bush and Blair set their sights on Iraq, claiming Saddam Hussein was linked to Al-Qaeda, possessed weapons of mass destruction, and was minutes away from launching attacks on Europe. All the claims turned out to be false, and Blair was accused of sexing up intelligence to justify the invasion. From there on, it was all downhill, with a large portion of England revolting against him. Even members of his own party, including his replacement Chancellor of the Exchequer Gordon Brown, distanced themselves, and some even quit. Facing weak competition in the 2005 election, Blair won a third term, but critics suspected it was only because he hinted he would be stepping down sometime in the future. A long line of whistleblowers kept Blair's spin doctors busy, while he focused less on the worsening Iraq war and made an effort to conquer global warming and champion peace in the Middle East. As Britain counted down the days until his rule ended, he made a pilgrimage to the Vatican to meet the Pope, amid rumours he was about to convert to Catholicism. During the meeting, Pope Benedict made a curious remark.
It seems it's very difficult to make miracles in prison.
Once seen as a miracle cure for nearly 2 decades of Tory rule, Blair leaves office with his party crippled from Iraq and scarred by scandals. While Britain may be greater than it was 10 years ago, it's unlikely that's what Tony Blair will be remembered for. Ben O'Rourke, ATV News.
North Korea will allow UN inspectors to visit its main nuclear plant tomorrow for the first time in 5 years.
It's a big step forward, and there are hopes now that the North Koreans will shut down their main reactor soon, as promised. ATV's Hailing Chan reports.
It would be the first on-site inspection of North Korea's nuclear facilities in nearly 5 years. Inspectors from the UN's International Atomic Energy Agency are expected to visit the country's main Yongbyon nuclear reactor tomorrow. South Korea's Foreign Minister Song Min-soon says he's optimistic North Korea will shut down its nuclear facilities as promised under a February deal in return for economic aid. Until recently, Pyongyang had ignored an April deadline to end its nuclear program because of a banking dispute with the U.S. Seoul says it will resume food aid to North Korea on the 30th of June. Meanwhile, the head of a European Union delegation that visited the nation this week says Pyongyang is committed to nuclear disarmament. Hubert Perker hopes the Yongbyon facility will be closed by the end of the year.
The real impression that they are willing immediately to shut down, and they will start it, they promised to do so we can be optimistic that this will be the next step immediately in the next future.
He said progress through talks with North Korea had speeded up after U.S. envoy Christopher Hill visited the country last week. Hailing Chan, ATV News.
Chief Executive Donald Tsang was in Beijing today to kickstart advanced celebrations marking the 10th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to the mainland. He hailed the one country, two systems policy as a success. Donald Tsang did the honors by opening an exhibition this morning showcasing Hong Kong as a shining example of the one country, two systems principle. Top mainland officials including Vice President Zhang Jinghong and State Councillor Tang Jiashuan also attended the opening. Tsang praised Hong Kong's mini-constitution, the Basic Law, for guaranteeing a high degree of autonomy and enhancing Hong Kong's status as Asia's world city. He also pledged to work hard to make sure Hong Kong becomes a global financial centre to match New York and London. The 10th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to China received plenty of praise from the State Council's Taiwan Affairs Office. Its spokesman said the city had made remarkable progress over the past decade thanks to the one country, two systems principle and should give Taiwan a better understanding of how a peaceful reunification can be reached along the same lines. With President Hu Jintao and other VIPs heading over here on Friday for the handover anniversary celebrations, police aren't taking any chances when it comes to security. They've been checking all areas surrounding the convention and exhibition centre in Wan Chai, where Hu will swear in the chief executive and his new cabinet. Manholes have been sealed and police have been checking everything from lampposts to rubbish bins.
The man who called himself Hong Kong Bin Laden was sentenced to 9 months in prison today for sending threatening letters to a major Chinese language newspaper. And a man convicted of drink driving and causing the deaths of 2 people was jailed for 18 months, sparking outrage among the victims' families who are complaining the sentence is too light. ATV's Nancy Ju reports.
The Kowloon City Court jailed Loan Kar Kong, aged 29, for 18 months today for dangerous driving causing death. Loan was drink driving on the 21st of May last year when he crashed head-on into a taxi in Ho Man Tin, leaving the driver and his female passenger dead. Loan's lawyers pleaded for leniency, arguing that he was very remorseful about what happened and had vowed not to drink drive again. In passing the sentence, Deputy Magistrate Raymond Wong condemned Loan's act as a selfish one that had led to 2 families losing their loved ones. While the magistrate said Loan had to be held responsible for what he had done, he reduced his sentence by 1/3 as he had pleaded guilty. Loan was also fined $4,000 and his driving license was suspended for 5 years and 9 months. But families of the victims complained today that Loan had got off too lightly and said they would appeal against the ruling. It was also Judgment Day for Ma Chiu Sing, who once dubbed himself Hong Kong Bin Laden. Ma was sentenced to 9 months behind bars for criminal intimidation for sending 5 letters to the Chinese language paper Oriental Daily News last year, threatening to harm its reputation. Ma, aged 49, who had been jailed for more than 6 years previously for planting poison food in Welcome supermarket stores, claimed the newspaper's reporting contributed to his prison term. In passing the sentence, Magistrate Wang Yu-wing said Ma threatened the paper because he held a grudge against it. Wang rejected Ma's appeal for bail, saying he was likely to commit a similar offence again in the future as he showed no remorse. Nancy Chu, ATV News.
U.S. lawmakers have passed a resolution calling for a new formal apology from Japan for forcing women into sexual slavery during the Second World War. But the resolution is non-binding, and today Tokyo suggested it will not apologize anymore. ATV's Hailing Chan reports.
Mr. Smith of
The U.S. congressional panel voted overwhelmingly for a resolution that calls on Tokyo to formally apologize again for forcing hundreds of thousands of women to work as prostitutes for the Japanese Imperial Army during the Second World War. The Foreign Affairs Committee approved the resolution by 39-2, paving the way for it to be considered by the entire House of Representatives. That could happen as early as mid-July.
Post-war Germany made the right choice. Japan, on the other hand, has actively promoted historical amnesia. The facts are plain. There can be no denying that the Japanese imperial military coerced thousands upon thousands of women primarily Chinese and Koreans, into sexual slavery during the war.
But the resolution is non-binding, and these former South Korean comfort women protesting outside the Japanese embassy in Seoul want more than an apology. They're demanding compensation by Tokyo. The Japanese government has rejected most compensation claims, and while the congressional resolution is a slap in the face for Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, considering it comes from his country's closest allies, he tried to play down the resolution's significance by insisting Tokyo's ties with Washington wouldn't be shaken. Abe himself sparked outrage recently by claiming that the Japanese military had not forced anyone into sexual slavery. Today, Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Yasuhisa Shiozaki suggested Tokyo will not apologize anymore. Historians say up to 200,000 women from China, South Korea, and other parts of Asia were forced to have sex with millions of Japanese soldiers during the war. Hailing Chan, ATV News.
Still to come on ATV's main news tonight, a look at Chungking Mansions 10 years after the handover.
And PLA parachuters get ready for a performance that depends on the weather.